Good afternoon, ladies and gentlemen. I welcome you to another session of the virtual Coal Regions Week on coal-fired power plants and repurposing of coal-fired power plants. It is a very interesting topic of what can we do with coal-fired power plants when we're not using them to make electricity from coal. And there are many possibilities, and in the next 1.5 hours we want to explore some of those possibilities, and I'm very happy to have really a set of speakers and discussants here that have a lot to say. Actually, we have been discussing in the back end basically over the last half an hour. I'm happy to enlarge that discussion and have you join in. Maybe before we begin on content, we want to make the session interactive, and there is the possibility for you to ask questions to the speakers. If you want to do so, please go to slido.com and enter the code CRIT3, or just if you want to use your smartphone, use the QR code and open up that on the smartphone. We will be able to see your questions. You will be able to see the questions other people have posed, and I will have a look at it, and the speakers will have a look at it, and we'll try to bring in those questions into the debate that we have here. Next slide. Maybe on the agenda that we have ahead of us, I will start with a very quick introduction of a new toolkit. As part of the Secretariat, we are developing guidelines, guiding materials, and I want to just give a glimpse of a new toolkit that we just put online. Then I'm very happy to have Rita Mergner, who is a expert, a researcher at WIP Renewable Energy, and is working in the Horizon 2020 Tracer project, and she will, from that project, bring in some knowledge on repurposing. Then we have a presentation from Anselm Sprandel from the city of Hamburg, where the coal-fired power plant Moorburg is. There's a plan to turn this into a hydrogen production facility. We have Thomas Eck from VGB, and he will present another EU-funded project, RECPP, a project which is really dedicated at the repurposing of coal-fired power plants, and he will give an overview. And then we have a panel discussion with 4 panelists who I will introduce when we get to the point of the panel discussion, but I hope it's going to be an interesting discussion. I'm looking forward to that. Next slide. As I said, we as the Secretariat provide support materials, and there's a new one on technology options, which you can find at coalregions.eu. Next slide. And it actually deals with several technologies which we found important as a background for regional decision makers. What is actually the potential of those technologies? I don't want to go into detail of the other fields, but the reuse of coal-fired power plants is one chapter in that toolkit. Next slide. And we look at various uses from energy storage views, combined with renewables, shift to biomass, natural gas, and also non-energy uses of those coal-fired power plants. I think it's, as I said, we've touched upon this in some events before, but I'm very happy to have a dedicated session on this topic, because I just think it's, if we look at a coal-fired power plant, it's such a big asset. It's a large amount of infrastructure. There's a grid, electricity grid, a powerful electricity grid tied to it. And even if burning coal is something that's going to be phased out eventually, sooner or later, depending on the power plant, the question is what to do with those assets. And it's really a question of economic question. It's a question of sustainability, of using the physical assets there, but also it's a question of value creation and jobs for the regions. And finding good solutions, I think, is very important. And I'm looking very much forward to hearing some of those solutions. And with that, I would like to hand over to Rita Mergner. Next slide. And as I said, Rita, you are part of the Tracer, Horizon 2020 Tracer project. You've been working in a number of coal regions with about 15 partners in 9 coal regions across Europe. And you've been collecting a lot of technical expertise and a lot of technical knowledge. And you wanted to give a short introduction of some technical options of coal-fired repurposing. Over to you, Rita.
Thank you. Good afternoon, ladies and gentlemen. My name is Rita Mergner. I am the coordinator of the Tracer project, Smart Strategies for the Transition in Coal-Intensive Regions. Next slide, please. And with my short presentation today, we have only 5 minutes to go. I would like to talk about challenges and opportunities in 9 coal-intensive regions in transition. As you can see here, the Tracer Consortium consists of 15 different organizations working strongly together. We are in the middle of our project. Next slide, please. And here you can see that our partnership is covering 9 coal regions in transition, which are very, very different. But we recognized in our project some common challenges and opportunities for new energy systems in the coal regions, which I would like to mention shortly. Next slide, please. So when we talk about challenges, we are in the middle of our Tracer project implementation, and we talk a lot with stakeholders because it's our key activity in the Tracer project to talk to the stakeholders, listen to them, and see what the visions could be, because these are the local stakeholders who will have in the end to accept the new concepts and implement them. So when we talk about challenges, we realized that, of course, introduction of new technologies, also of renewable energy technologies, is very much connected with research innovation activities. And there are rather low innovation rates in Tracer coal regions in general. So there is a gap that still needs to be filled in with a diversified package of different options, of course, and renewable energy would be part of it. Then also developing storage capacity for both electricity and heat is of course of high relevance. However, in some Tracer regions, especially in Jiu Valley, as it is not a big region, there is lack of data. Of course, this is the first step is to identify the data, the potential, to analyze it, to assess it, and to look for options. And if this background is missing, it of course influences the acceleration of implementation of different technologies, RES technologies. So this was identified as a big lack in Jiu Valley. Also, involvement of SMEs should be taken into account, because local SMEs that exist and of course that could be newly created, they could contribute to the overall challenge. But sometimes from our stakeholders in target regions, our project partners were complaining a bit that it is a pity that SMEs are sometimes not considered to complement. And of course, another important point is that we need a long-term thinking, which is of course going hand in hand with long-term strategies to allow a continued growth of renewable energies at least cost. Next slide, please. However, we have also opportunities for renewable energies production, possibilities for large-scale installations, for floating photovoltaic. Lots of research activities are ongoing. The package should be, of course, diversified. Research activities should be implemented on a larger scale in all tracer regions in transition. And from our stakeholder interviews, we noticed that, of course, hydrogen, production of energy, storage solution is very important, but also smaller solutions, for example, energy crops for on post mining lands, on reclaimed lands, could be also contributing a bit. This is still, let's say, a very marginal concept. A little bit implementation in Lusatia is already existing, but still very, let's say, rather poor implementation in other regions due to lack of maybe knowledge and some concrete actions, also difficulties to involve the local farmers. Also, district heating operation is an important issue that needs to be considered. And of course, what is the added value to the local population? This could be implemented by energy communities also in the regions. So these are, let's say, the key words in our project that we discovered in discussions with the stakeholders. Next slide, please. And I would like also to invite all of you to check our results on our website. There is a variety of different reports. We will also have a nice summer school online organized this summer. So please check our website and try to be involved. I think I used now the time for talking. Thank you a lot. I'm very glad to promote our project here. And next slide, please. This is the last one for thanking. Thank you a lot.
Thank you, Rita, for that presentation, that overview. That is really the satellite picture, and I would encourage you to have a look at the website if you haven't done so. There's a lot of materials and reports that are really interesting and that contain a wealth of information. From that satellite's perspective, we're going to zoom into one specific case, and I'm happy to introduce now Anselm Sprandel. He's the head of energy and climate protection at the Hamburg Agency for Environment and Energy, so at the city of Hamburg. And of course, Hamburg is not a coal region in terms of a coal mining region, but Hamburg does have a coal-fired power plant. Actually, one of the newest coal-fired power plants in Germany just started power generation in 2015, but stops selling electricity beginning of this year due to the German coal phase out. And I find it a very interesting case because you're now discussing in Hamburg turning this into hydrogen production. And Anselm, I'm looking forward to your presentation. Of course, you come from the city of Hamburg. The question is, what does the city administration actually have to play in this? It's a coal-fired power plant that is owned by a utility. And of course, I'd be very interested to hear as part of your presentation, what was or what is your role in this process? Over to you, Anselm.
Thank you very much, Timon. And good afternoon, ladies and gentlemen, dear colleagues. A warm welcome from Hamburg. I just jump into my topic, Moorburg. Moorburg is a small district on the edge of the port of Hamburg. Above all, however, it is the name of a large hard coal-fired power plant that was closed at the end of 2020 and for whose repurposing the free and Hanseatic city of Hamburg has launched an ambitious project. And that is what I would like to tell you about now. So next slide, please. I don't see the next slide.
But it is on. It may have
it is on. Okay, so it's a little bit slowly maybe. Now you should see the outline. You see the topics to be presented in the following 8 slides. And at the end, I'll also come back to the issue of governance that you mentioned just now, Timon. Next slide. Yes, that's it. Thank you. Let's start with some framework conditions. Germany has international responsibility as an industrial nation with ambitious climate targets. For that, its installed generation capacity from coal-fired power plants on the market is initially to be reduced to 30 gigawatts by 2022 and to 17 gigawatts by 2030 and completely phased out by 2038. The phase out is to be implemented gradually and in a socially acceptable manner. And to this end, the German Parliament had set out shutdown schedules and actions with compensation payments for operators in order to gradually take the coal-fired capacity off the grid over the next years, as you can see in the picture. Next slide, please. General conditions include that in Hamburg, at the end of 2019, the Senate adopted an update of its climate plan and a new climate protection law. Greenhouse gas emissions are to be reduced by 55% by 2030, and Hamburg is to become climate neutral by 2050. On this path, an important role is foreseen for hydrogen. The current 2020 government program addresses the hydrogen topic as well and states that Hamburg should be established as a center for the hydrogen industry and innovative storage technologies. Our local industry, meanwhile, is very committed to decarbonizing its production too. All German states believe that all North German states believe that hydrogen produced from renewables is the strategic energy carrier of the future. Together with other areas bordering the North Sea, the aim is to become a leading green hydrogen region. And it goes without saying that these regional goals tie in closely with the goals of the federal government. The National Hydrogen Strategy interlinks climate, energy, industrial, and innovation policies. So next slide, please. Now we go into hydrogen. What about hydrogen demand in Hamburg? Several basic industries, copper, steel, and aluminium, and refineries have settled in Hamburg. There are around 20 major industrial companies in the port area alone, as well as other production facilities in the immediate vicinity. Additionally, there is the Hamburg port, an airport, and lots of demand from logistics and mobility. A survey from 2020 showed that by 2030 in Hamburg, industry demand for hydrogen will increase up to 120,000 tons. You can see that on the picture. Simultaneously, the share of grey hydrogen has to decrease gradually and has to be replaced by green gas. But the potential for green renewables in Germany is unlikely to satisfy the demand for green hydrogen under the aspects of availability, economic efficiency, and acceptance. So imports of green hydrogen and synthesis products are therefore considered very necessary. We can go to the next slide, please. In Hamburg, there are many activities to enable the ramp up of hydrogen. Hamburg is keen to establish a hydrogen economic cluster as a logical continuation of its cluster policy, which has already proven successful for years. In the process, the Renewable Energy Hamburg cluster is being extended to include the priority topic of hydrogen. International alliances are being forged and an import strategy is currently being developed. There are also plans to establish a technology and innovation center for hydrogen technology for mobility applications. And we attach great importance to a Moorburg feasibility study, which is developing a concept for the subsequent use of the site, leaving all technologies open. A scalable electrolyzer is included in this analysis. We are currently monitoring the IPCEI process, where national governments have invited submissions of outlines for marketable upscaled hydrogen projects to apply for public funding under IPCEI rules. In this context, sketches have also been submitted for Hamburg and also for the Moorburg site, and we are currently awaiting an initial assessment by the government. It is especially pleasing to see the diversity of projects featuring undertakings along the entire hydrogen value chain. So, what about Moorburg? Next slide, please. As I said, Moorburg is a large, hard coal-fired power plant that was closed at the end of 2020. On the slide, beside the picture, you find the key data of the power plant. As I have stated above, the German parliament had set out, inter alia, auctions for hard coal plant operators to gradually take capacity of the grid over the next years. And already the first round of auctions for the decommissioning of Germany's hard coal plants was met with keen interest by the country's coal companies, leading to a clear oversubscription of the auctioned 4 gigawatts of capacity. And in December 2020, the German Federal Network Agency decided to award compensation for a complete phase out of the coal-fired power plant Moorburg in Hamburg. The installations that will be taken offline in 2021 include both blocks that you can see on the picture of the power plant. So it will be completely taken off. This, as you can imagine, has been a very rapid and surprising development for us, for the city of Hamburg. We are quite pleased that with the Moorburg coal-fired power plant, a very large emitter of CO2 and thus a very large threat to the climate is going off the grid. Nevertheless, there are also disadvantages to this step. The shutdown of Moorburg will result in the loss of nearly 200 jobs. But we are convinced that this loss will be more than compensated for by new jobs in the booming renewable energies, heat transition, and sector coupling sectors. After all, suddenly, an excellent commercial site in an outstanding location had become available in the port of Hamburg and in direct vicinity of important industrial settlements. And now the city wants to take advantage of this opportunity and to develop a future-oriented energy and industrial policy concept together with the business community. We are developing the concept of a green hydrogen hub. And this will be followed in the next slide. The Moorburg site is ideally suited for the subsequent use as a hub of innovative green energy technologies. Let me make an important remark. We do not see yet finished plans, but are in a phase of sounding out and concept development. Moorburg is connected to the national 380 kilovolt transmission network and to the 110 kilovolt network of the city of Hamburg. With a 380 kilovolt connection, the location has direct access to the supply of green electricity from wind power, onshore and offshore, and therefore also has the possibility to actually produce green hydrogen in relevant quantities. In addition, seagoing vessels can access to the location directly and use the quay and port facilities as an import terminal. The focus is on an electrolyzer with a capacity of at least 100 megawatt. Several consortia are interested in building and operating an electrolyzer at the Moorburg site. Who ultimately wins the bid will depend not only on financial conditions, but also on who best serves the city's industrial, energy and climate policy goals, and who best fits into the hydrogen strategies of Germany and of the European Union and can thus acquire funding. Because without substantial public funding, the hydrogen economy will not be able to take off. And important is the site is large enough to accommodate not only a large electrolysis plant, but also other energy-related facilities, for example, a high-temperature storage facility or the import terminal for hydrogen. The municipal gas grid operator of Hamburg also intends to expand a Hamburg hydrogen network for the industry in the port. We call it HHWIN, within 10 years, and is already working on the necessary distribution infrastructure to facilitate supplies to industry and large businesses. And numerous potential customers for green hydrogen are located close to the site, enabling it to cover the entire hydrogen value chain from generation and storage to transport and utilization in various sectors. So next slide, please. Northern Germany offers ideal conditions for establishing a strong hydrogen economy, especially with regard to European and beyond European cooperation. Numerous Hamburg companies have already shown, by way of their IPCEI project outlines, how this can be developed along the entire value chain, from the production of green hydrogen, energy supply, and the connection element of transport infrastructure to the decarbonization of industrial processes and logistics. And HHWIN Hamburg Hydrogen Network offers enormous potential for climate mitigation. After all, it would enable more than a third of Hamburg's natural gas consumption to be switched to fossil-free sources. It creates the basis for securing jobs in Hamburg and for initiating the rapid decarbonization of industry's production processes. And our local industry is very committed to decarbonizing its production and is keen to use hydrogen. To do this, it requires access to regional and trans-regional European hydrogen suppliers. And conversely, European hydrogen producers and importers require access to the Hamburg sales market. Connection of the HHWIN to the Gasunie Deutschland transmission network is scheduled for 2026. This will link Hamburg to the emerging European hydrogen network, allowing the city to accelerate the ramp up of the national and the European hydrogen economy. And coming to my last slide, I have already said a few things about how we are managing the Moorburg project. But finally, I would like to draw attention to some additional points on the subject of governance. The site where the Moorburg power plant is located is co-owned by the operating company Vattenfall, the Port of Hamburg, and the municipal electricity grid operator. And this means that the power plant site can only be converted in consultation with us, with the Free and Hanseatic City of Hamburg. In addition, key stakeholders in the future hydrogen supply chain are other municipal companies. First, the municipal gas grid operator, which I mentioned already, which intends to build the hydrogen industrial grid, and which, for logical reasons, should be connected to an electrolyzer at the Moorburg site. Second, an electrolyzer will only be economically viable if the resulting waste heat can be commercially exploited too. And this is where the municipal district heating company of Hamburg comes into play. It can capture the heat generated and feed it into the heat supply system for Hamburg's households. And this would simultaneously make a major contribution to the gradual decarbonization of the city's heat supply. You see, all the elements fit together in this concept. Third, the conversion and further development of the existing coal-fired power plant will only be economically feasible if it receives public funding, as I mentioned already, from the federal state, from the European Union maybe, and from us, from the city-state itself. So this is another important lever of influence for us. And finally, and this is what I will close with, finally, the city's close networking with industry and transport and logistic companies and all other stakeholders is a very strong condition for the success of the future-oriented repurposing of the Moorburg site. Thank you very much.
Yeah, thank you, Anselm, for that impressive presentation. I think I don't know. I'm overwhelmed that it shows that complexity of that issue. The interlinkages with other sectors. You said mentioned the port, the airport, the metal production, other sectors. Yeah, I find it a very impressive example. It links to the important issue of hydrogen, which we've explicitly discussed in one of our last sessions last fall. I would have 1,000 questions on my mind asking you in detail. Maybe I just at this point ask one. When do you expect? Can we have a field visit and really see on the ground the transition? As I understood, it's a plan so far. It's a complex plan. You're trying to bring in the different stakeholders. When do you think first things can be really touched and felt on the ground?
Yes, as I said, we hope to get funding by the IPCEI process. And for getting that, we have to go on site within the next 3 years and have to complete the first projects in 2025. So let's meet in 2023 or in 2025 again, and then I hope I can show you the sites. Okay,
sounds like a good deal. Good, thank you, Anselm. You stay with us, and if there is question to Anselm, please put them on the Slido, and you will be able to answer them in the final Q&A.
Yes, thank you.
Thank you. Having said that, I would like to come to our next speaker. That is Thomas Eck. Thomas Eck works at VGB, which is the Technical Association of Energy Plant Operators. And Thomas has a double position because he will present a specific EU-funded project, which is specifically dedicated to the repurposing of coal-fired power plants, RECPP. And in that project, Thomas, you said you're doing a mapping of really looking at individual coal-fired power plants. It's at many of them, most of them, all of them in Europe. What are you planning to do? Thomas, over to you.
Yes, Timon, thanks for the kind introduction. Hello, everybody. A warm welcome also from my side. It's a pleasure to be here. As you already mentioned, I work at the VGB office in Essen, the Technical Association of Energy Plant Operators. And today I'm also here in the second function, as a coordinator of the RECPP project, means repurposing coal power plants during energy transition. And to answer your question, hopefully most of the sites are mapped within the project, but I'll come to that later on. So the presentation is structured as follows. I will give you some information, short overview about the key data of our project, then short information about the impact and innovation of RECPP, and then go a little bit into detail for the work packages and especially the mapping of sites you already mentioned. And in the last part, I will close with a short outlook to our next workshop within the project. So here you can see in the first slide the key data of the project, title already mentioned. The project started on the 1st of July last year. That means we are now in the second half of the first year. Project duration is 2 years, so it ends in June 2022. As you see, 13 European partners are involved as core partners. These are the first 13 logos shown here from the companies, supported by, at the moment, further 11 associated partners. The other 11 logos at the bottom of that page. Further information on the partners and also the project is given on our website. So please go to recpp.eu to find some more information on that. The next two slides describe the impact and innovation of our project, starting with the situation in Europe. But I think I can keep that very short because everybody who is in here is well aware of the situation. So most countries in Europe are already decided about the coal phase out, or discussion is going on in the countries. And our main point in that is the use of the valuable assets, like described here. So the infrastructure, but also stuff, the land, all these things, also costly parts, so serving PPAs, steam and energy supply to nearby industry are in the focus of our project. So RECPP for the first time puts the coal-fired power plants in the focus. That's the new thing in that project. And the second slide on impact and innovation shows how we will do that. So we support coal regions in transition by mapping first the plant sites, European coal power plant sites, and then afterwards mapping also of the sustainable solutions for repurposing. The third part after that is the clustering of both the sites and the repurposing solutions. And then in the next step, in the fourth part, the things found out are matched. And at the end, our aim is to find out the best sustainable approaches for the different sites, for the repurposing option in an energy production sense. This is also shown in the project structure, which you can see here on the left-hand side, top of the page. So that work package 2 deals with the described mapping of sites, and the next work package deals with the mapping of the sustainable solutions. Now I will show you how have we done that. So we need a lot of information from the sites in order to match them afterwards with the solutions and the things which are needed for these different solutions. And we developed an online service for that mapping of sites, which consists of the main aspects, the basic power plant data first, then the technological systems used in the sites, and the third part, also very important, the infrastructure, which means internal infrastructure, external one, and also the surrounding one. On this map of Europe, you see the sites already in our system, which are at the moment are a little bit more than 100, but a lot of more are coming in there. And I will show you two examples, one table on the common internal infrastructure as a result from that mapping, and the answers asked to the power plant operators. And as a second example, a figure on the access to different kinds of reservoirs and water courses, which means the infrastructure is very important for the later use, the future use in kind of energy production. So these are the main aspects, but not to forget, all these things are technical things, not to forget the legal aspects. We had a first workshop end of January, and one of the topics discussed have been the legal boundaries. So despite this technical part, also the legal aspects to keep permits and things like that are of big importance for the later use of the sites. Last slide from my short introduction to the project deals with the second workshop, which will take place on the 21st of May, 2021, as an interactive online event for sure. This is the only way at the moment. You will find information also on our website, recpp.eu, and the workshop deals with the results of that mapping of the power plant sites. But the main focus is on the collection of feedback from stakeholders regarding that mapping of repurposing solutions. So you can register online also via the website, and you can receive event news if you want to just subscribe with your email address, first and last name on the website. The workshop will start with key presentations at the beginning and then a panel discussion afterwards. And to have it interactive, we then go over to so-called virtual groups, parallel groups, dealing with the different kind of solutions and things discussed in that work package 3, which means CO2 before and after in the first group, green products in the second one, energy storage is dealt with in the third group. We have new aspects of sector coupling, very important point, nearby industry, chemical industry, not only energy is a topic for the future use. Then in the fifth group, we have sustainable solutions based on EU taxonomy. So not to forget that kind of discussion. And in the last group, we have the repowering part dealt with. So to keep it interactive, we had good experience with the first workshop. It was a quite good discussion in there. So if you are interested in information on the project, please go to the website or contact us, contact me. Here you find the contact data, and thanks for your kind attention.
Yeah, thank you, Thomas. Thank you for that presentation. And that sounds like a very interesting workshop and events that are an interesting follow-up to our short session here. Just to get this straight, you're saying you're mapping the individual characteristics of coal-fired power plants, right? And you said 100 sites. How big of a mapping is that? How much data do you collect per site, just to get a rough feeling?
Yeah, as described on that one slide, we had 7 main chapters, and I'm not sure how many questions there have been in, but a lot of information. So we have a big Excel sheet dealing with this information. And the idea then at the end is to cluster them, to cluster the sites, because we cannot do that on an individual basis. But there's a lot of data in, and for sure, maybe we also, if we are in a further step, have to ask the power plant operators for additional information if we come to special solutions. But it's always, you have to keep the balance, not to ask them for 2 hours. I think it took about half an hour, 3/4 of an hour to give us all the data. And that's a lot of time for the people which are busy, for sure.
Good, but it sounds like it's worthwhile doing that and collecting that database and making that assessment possible. Cool, Thomas, thank you. Sounds good. I hope that many people join the workshop and hand you more information. That's an interesting initiative. Having said that, we would now go to the panel discussion. And before we do that, maybe can we have the Slido slide? And I would like to invite all of you, go on slido.com, enter CRIT3, or just take a snapshot on the QR code, and then you'll be able to hand in questions to me, to those speakers that have presented so far, and to the panelists, the 4 panelists that will be discussing now on the issue. Maybe I'll give a very brief overview of the panelists, and you see their faces now. There is Thomas Kienberger. He's a professor at University Leuven. There's Maximilian Niederhel from Siemens. There is Piotr Kreci from the Czech energy utility. And there is Rainer Fronius from EDF. I'll give a little bit more detailed introductions to you when we start talking. And Thomas, now different Thomas, Thomas Kienberger, starting with you. You're scientist, you're professor at the University of Leuven, you're a chair of the Energy Network Technology. When you've heard all of this, I mean, there was one very specific example of hydrogen, of using a coal-fired power plant for hydrogen production. If you were to give an overview of what is the technology range are we talking here, can you give some examples of what you find interesting technologies when we talk about repurposing a coal-fired power plant, using the acids and using it in a way that it's really in line with the climate neutrality target, right? And also the long-term idea of making coal-fired power plants or the acids carbon neutral. what would be your key technologies which you would find most important?
Yeah, good question, Timon. When you look at that topic, then you see in a second that it is super complex. There is energy transition, and the energy transition has, of course, this 3Ds we all know. It is decentralization, it is digitalization, it is democratization. So there comes a lot of movement, so to say, from bottom up, which actually do not mean that we only need to have decentralized sites in future. We will have the need for such larger scale installations. And when we look on those installations, there is various technological options in those energy hubs of the future, which can be installed on old power plant sites. And Anselm Sprandel showed very interestingly how this can happen. The example of Hamburg is a good one. Hamburg has the speciality with the huge port and all that stuff, and there, of course, hydrogen makes super sense. But changing over old coal power plant sites, it's not only hydrogen. It's a huge thing, but there is other options, of course, as well. When we speak about repurposing of coal power plants, there is various sectors and various clusters you can shape. And this is what we have done in the RFCs project. We have looked, of course, on sector coupling options, but we have also looked on other things. There can be a change in fuel, of course. This is what the guys in Great Britain are doing. There is the options to use the old sites for ancillary services. Virtual inertia is a big topic. Facts is a big topic. There is also, of course, non-energetic use options for those sites, logistics and so on and so forth. I personally, I'm fully sure that the use of the dedicated sites depends always on the embedment of the site in the overall structure. For instance, I'm from Austria. Here in Austria, we see that there is, of course, some renewable electricity potentials, and we will face some huge power surpluses in our control zone, but we cannot cover our demands out of those surpluses. We will see imports of hydrogen, and in this context, of course, such old sites can act as hubs where there is import options possible. And another big thing I see personally is the industry coupling. We see a big transition also in industry. This is also what Anselm mentioned. We see, for instance, chemical plants where there is ammonia going to be produced. They will turn off their big CH4 reformer stages. There is, of course, also good coupling options. We see the big topic of e-fuels, for instance. Here is always the big question coming up: where comes the CO2 from? Here is also this big industry connection important. Yeah, just as a first view on this interesting points.
Yeah, thank you, Thomas. I think this notion of we got to really look site specific. What is the appropriate solution is an important point. But I also found this. I mean, it came up in Anselm's presentation, and you stressed it again. This industry coupling, right? It's more than just the electricity supply. It is really what are the consumers right close to the power plant, the site, and what potentials come from that other energy users beyond electricity also. Maybe I'll hand over to Maximilian. Maximilian Nieder, you're from Siemens. You're in the business development energy storage solution. So you're an energy storage expert, I would assume. But I mean, when we started discussing, I was amazed that you have a radar of technologies developed that could be interesting for repurposing, and it fits with what both Thomases have said of different options for the sites. If I were to ask you, hey, what is your key message? What do you think are most important options, or is it important to look very site specific, and what do we have to look for then if we have to look site specific?
Mm-hmm. Yeah, thanks, Timon. Also, warm welcome here, and thanks for having me. Yeah, I could not agree more with what both Thomases had said. Yeah, I think at the current stage that we're in, it's always a very site-specific decision that we need to make. So analyze the potential of the surroundings. But I think as we proceed, taking also into consideration what Anselm had showed us here, I think there will be more projects that could be used as lighthouse and also give inspiration, I think. And I think that will guide us there, finding out, let's say, a leveraged level of interconnected industries into that whole framework, but not letting the initial task of supplying energy to the grids and using those very important infrastructural points in the grids to somehow supply that energy in the future. I think the whole sector coupling topic is an additional benefit to the energy transition. But I think using parts of the equipment that we have at site is looking at the overall economy quite beneficial for all our future. And I think it's going to be at the starting point that we're currently in. It's going to be site specific, but always keeping in mind what does the future bring us, and where is the strategy heading to. I think taking this into account, there will be always solutions that could be figured out site specific, but can be enlarged or can be taken as a lighthouse project for regions and countries.
Yeah, thank you for that view. And I mean, you highlight, and that has been highlighted before, it is actually an asset, those coal-fired power plants, and they can be used, they should be used, right? It should be used again, but we need to check exactly how. Maybe I'll quickly jump to Petr Krejci, you're a project manager at Czech, the Czech energy utility, which has a lot of capacity also out of Czechia. You have a lot of coal-fired power plants, but you have also a lot of wind. But if you were looking at, I say, the coal-fired power plants of your company, and you think of, okay, this is going down, the use of those coal-fired power plants as coal-burning power plants is going down. Do you see those sites as an asset, or is it a burden for you as a company and you want to get rid of them because, well, if you can't burn coal, let's do it somewhere else and build a wind farm somewhere up north and shut down the old coal-fired power plant? What would you say?
Greetings from Prague. Thank you for that question. Definitely, it's like if you have old house, right? So you can decide to demolish it completely or start renovation. And with the coal sites, it's more value than just in the buildings. As we have seen in the presentation from Marburg, there is a lot of infrastructure that has lifetime much beyond the buildings, basically, because it's a unique cross of all possible infrastructure you can imagine. It's a unique playground, basically, to do whatever you can do and whatever you can imagine. So definitely there is a great value in it, and it's much beyond the real estate in it. And our approach is to investigate it, but we don't want to invent all by ourselves. So therefore we need partners, and therefore CES has joined the European project and the consortium led by VGB.
Yeah, Thank you for that quick answer, and we will jump into more details a little later. But I first want to introduce the fourth panelist, Rainer Fronius from EDF, from the French utility or French electricity utility. Rainer, we've heard a lot about, hey, it's site-specific, and it's important to look at the sites. But when we started discussing, I found it interesting saying, hey, how do you figure out? Is it do you only look at the technical parts of what's in the power plant, or what are your processes of developing strategies for what you want to do with coal-fired power plants after burning coal in them?
Yeah. Hello from Paris. So I'm Rainer Fronius. I work at the EDF Engineering and Maintenance Services, and I work in strategy and development. Now, in all those deconstruction projects we already made at EDF, I can perfectly join what Rita Mergner said. It's first stakeholder interests and then CO2 emissions. But at the same time, as we are a utility, we have the responsibility to still deliver energy at reasonable prices. Now, in those cases, things can be very variable and extremely dependent on what we find, on those assets we find on a place. So I have two examples for you. One is in the east of Paris. There were two coal power plants in a site that was transformed in 3 turbines for fast response, taking care of the variability. Offices for the deconstruction engineering. So this unit of deconstruction engineering is on a site that itself deconstructed. And a big part of that area is a biotope today. That is one example. Another example is in Aramon in the south of France, along the Rhone River. There we had only one coal power plant, and we managed to put up a incubator that's called Clean Tech Valley with local stakeholders. So it's a public-private partnership. And the offices, the old offices of that power plant are now used by the Clean Tech Valley. In addition to that, on the area of the deconstructed power plant, we have a 5 megawatt solar power plant. This 5 megawatt will be developed even further when the rest of the area will be cleared. Other projects are going on, other projects are about to be studied, but what we are particularly fond of, what we are quite proud of, we are members of VGB, and we are very involved in the RECPP project Thomas Eck just presented. As a matter of fact, I'm responsible for the sustainable solutions in that project. Yeah, sustainable is one of the key issues here, if we find any solutions.
Thank you, Rainer, for that. I mean, that sounds fantastic. So on the one hand, you try, I would say, the classical, the using the core of the power plant for grid stability things. Then you add renewables on the site because you have the site, but you also do non-energy uses like an incubator in the office buildings. Is that correct? So it's really this mix of those very, very different approaches or uses, basically.
Yeah, it's a mix that's interesting, and we need to take into account what people want on those places. Of course, there's the assets, and asset is an infrastructure, but asset is also people with the things they are able to do, the things they want to do. But sometimes you will even need to let that area go for a city that needs it for its development. So you need those stakeholders.
Yeah. Good, interesting point. Maybe Maximilian, may I ask you again? I don't know, what would you think are technologies which you think are maybe important or underrated? And if you think of from a provider of technologies perspective, which you are, what are a little bit the time horizons of technologies, or can you put different time horizons to technologies? Are there technologies which you think, oh, that's an intermediary step to keep it running for 2-3 more years, and other technologies where you say, hey, that's a major shift, right? Hydrogen to me seems that's a very long-term strategies. What are short-term options, and how do you distinguish between the two?
I think there is one crucial part, and as you mentioned it, the question is always what is really the long-term goals. I think that's what we need to take into account, and if there is a decision, as Anselm has shown it, to somehow transfer a complete part of the harbor into a hydrogen hub, that's something that you need to take into account and make the steps right now, as we heard from him. But there is a long-term perspective. On the other hand side, I think there are technologies available that could be implemented to somehow solve parts of today's issues. We can start with smaller steps, adding batteries for flexibilization, adding synchronous condenser for grid stability purposes, all of those things that could be brought in short term. And for sure, the whole topic of coal to gas shift as an intermediate step. And I think there are various technologies arising that could help also using part of the infrastructure that we have at the site. So thermal storage is as a part of the integration and changing the way of the heat is produced within a steam power plant, for instance. I think that is more on the intermediate steps, but I think it's crucial to somehow make the first steps right now and be ready whenever those decisions are made, because that is somehow in front of us. And to implement, to develop those projects, to make the right decision, and really go into let's say also a sustainable future. That's what Rainer said. Looking always what is the long-term perspective. I think that is what makes it crucial. And on the technology side, there's a variety given, but the right selection and the sustainability in accordance with the long-term targets is somehow the crucial part here.
Cool, thank you very much. I see other panelists eager to jump in. Thomas, you want to add to that?
Yes, thank you very much. I want to respond to Max. There is tremendous things going on from my perspective on a market, so to say. We see a super huge increasing CO2 price, for instance. I think at the moment we have some 44 euros per ton. Hey, who could imagine, I don't know, 2 years from now that we will see such prices? Not so many people, I guess. This is on the one hand side something really interesting going on, and on the other hand side we see cost down curves for technologies like hydrogen electrolyzers and all those things. We see cost down rates from batteries which are tremendous. We see of course PV prices going further down, and this will trigger so much in future. And I think we need to be brave now, and we have to find site-specific solutions, and we have to start with the investments now to be fit for future. And this is from my perspective the point. Things will get cheaper, things will change, and we see this change. We already see it, and this is the point. We should not wait till there is of course some clear economics being feasible. We see where the trend goes to, and so this is of course my perspective out of academia. That's clear, but this kind of braveness. This is what I expect.
I like the brave academic view. I share that. Thank you, Thomas. Petra, I mean, what we're discussing now is really this phase in of very many options, and it is of course different from what we've heard in the Hamburg case, which may be very specific. It's a fairly new coal-fired power plant. It's been built. It's been shut down very early. Now there's the urge to build up something, an alternative for basically a almost closed down power plant. But how's it do you phase in gradually all those different options in the various sites you have, or how do you deal with it?
Well, the approach is side by side, so there is no silver bullet that can be applied for all the sites. And basically, it copies the methodology introduced by Thomas Eck in the presentation of the RECPP. Basically, we have to distinguish if it's the district heating source, for example, as we have one of such power plant for Prague, or if it's just lying close to the mine, which offers huge areas for whatever you would like to do there, for example, photovoltaic fields. So it's really side-by-side work, and it needs a different strategy for different sites. So it's really time demanding. And to comment what Thomas Kienberger said, even though it's going cheaper and cheaper, it's still not in the economical feasible way. So unfortunately, so we would like to support it, and we are open to different solutions. But as mentioned by Rainer Fronius, we need to deliver electricity which will be achievable by the customers. So that means it doesn't have to cost thousands of euros. It still has to be something that you can, you don't have to think about what you have plug in the socket or what you have plug out. If I may have one question to Thomas Kienberger, it was inspired by the presentation of Rita. For me, the synonym for local involvement of SMEs is Austria. So do you see some chances in your perspective, technology perspective, for local SMEs to be involved in your country or in general?
Yeah, good question. Good question, Peter. Yeah, we work together with quite many SMEs producing some very specific technologies and stuff, and we see them really getting more and more involved also in this kind of field of products and research. And yes, we will see some super nice developments out also of these sectors. As you have seen, as you have said it, in Austria we have quite many SMEs dealing with industrial products. This is where I can see such innovations going on. We are leading quite a huge project on industrial carbonization, and there we see such technologies which need some hydrogen for the producement of chemicals and stuff. And yeah, here I see this kind of innovation very strongly.
Very good. Thank you for that.
Thank you. I maybe want to open up another issue or focus on another issue, and that's heat supply. I mean, what do you see there? That's the other part of many coal-fired power plants, not in every country, and very differently between France, Germany, Czech Republic, for example. But how do you see the options for heat supply? And of course, that is much more localized, right? In terms of electricity, we could imagine, hey, if we have a good grid, take out a coal-fired power plant and you balance it off through the grid somehow. But if you take out the heat supply, then the city is cold, right? You need to do something about it. What options, what challenges do you see there?
Yeah. So if I can go on this one, it's my favorite question, in fact. Thank you for that, Timon. Of course, you have a long-term solution to say we will isolate our buildings, which is exactly what we should do. Now, of course, everybody knows that this is something that has to be. I would like to do it today, but there is no capital available for us, and somebody has to live somewhere. Yeah, so this will take time. So we definitely need in those repurposing projects to take a look at the district heating of those sites. Just replacing them with gas is in some parts, of course, we will need to do that in some places, but the best thing would be to try to find solutions that take that into account. Look, take just an example of a data center. Yeah, it will not produce any electrical energy, even it will consume some, but perhaps we could use some of that heat power. Yeah. There are some geothermal solutions we will have to take into account. Yeah? And of course, in some places, we'll replace the coal power plants by gas turbines, by combined cycle gas power plants. There, the heating could be solved. But I think the idea of a centralized heating, where it exists, where those infrastructures of centralized heating exist, those should be kept. I think in terms of CO2 emissions of an existing infrastructure for heat, we should try to keep that as long as possible.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, thank you. Are there other views on this? I mean, this long-term idea, of course, we insulate, we really bring down the energy consumption of our buildings, but we know our modernization rates are slow, right? Even if we speed them up, it's not going to change overnight. We need an intermediary heat supply, but if we would substitute all of that for gas, that brings us also into a dependency on gas, which has its disadvantages also from a climate perspective. So what are other options? Oh, I see you're eager to join in. Petra, please go first.
Well, I wouldn't go in the details of technical options. I just would like to stress the process, how it goes. So first we have to start from the customer. So as we have seen Marburg or city of Hamburg, so important is to know what there is the strategy of the end customer. And then we can provide technical solution for that. So, and we have also one question, Alice is asking for that in our platform. So it partially answers also this question, what should the local politics do, how to support the energy transition. So we need to plan, ideally, if it's a time plan also.
Yeah. Maximilian, do you want to add to that? Well,
yes, somehow to the statements that Rainer has put out. I think we're back at the situation that we've discussed initially. Yeah, so it's very site specifically looking at what is there, what kind of infrastructure there, what taking into account what Petra said is looking at the long-term perspective. So how is that rural area developing, and what are the goals here, and then find smart ways of integrating. And for instance, taking data center, using heat pumps to bring heat to the required temperature level. But I think to not go into the technical details here, I think there are solutions available. I think it really comes down to taking into account what is the overall goal, where are we heading to, what are the development plans, and then find smart ways to achieve that goal. And it could be always, and I think it will be in several cases, hybrid solutions that could cope with everything that is needed. So every energy form that is required, and to bring that into one site makes a lot of sense. Yeah.
Okay. Thomas, do you want to add to that? I mean, there are technical solutions, and it's more than just substitute it with gas. Of course, keeping some of the combined heat and power of centralized power heat supply running, or maybe slowly phasing it down or adapting it. What are technical solutions which you think are good and should be explored?
Yeah, what Max had said was already parts of the answer I had given on that. What we see out of a research project is that the supply part of district heating systems will diversify in future. It will strongly diversify. And if there is coal-fired plants phasing out, there is other sources. There is, of course, my favorite topic, industrial waste heat. There is quite a lot of industrial waste heat being wasted today. This heat can be used. It can be used in future. Heating grids will change in future. They will come down with the temperature. There can be waste heat being used in the return line of the district heating system. There can be heat pumps being a quite big solution also in those systems. There will be probably way bigger district heating systems than we see them today, where there is quite many waste heat sources being injecting heat to the system. So I'm pretty sure that we will see solutions. Yeah, so I'm looking into future with quite some optimism with regard to this. Also, when the coal-fired plants phase out.
We'll continue this discussion, but maybe could we have the other three speakers back in, Anselm and Rita and Thomas Eck? Maybe they want to add also. But first, Rainer, did you want to add directly? Otherwise, I would have a question which I've taken from the questions from the participants.
In fact, I didn't want to. I wanted to act on the question from the participants.
Perfect. Then the question is, what kind of support do we actually think is necessary, or what kind of support do we expect policymakers should provide for repurposing? I mean, Anselm had said that specifically for hydrogen, there is a need for support. Some of you have mentioned it. Hey, prices of technologies have come down, but they are at the edge or still more expensive than the existing alternatives. Rainer, what's your view on what kind of support mechanisms, support structures do we need to make that transition smoothly?
I'll just take a step back, and then I'll get there. I think the decentralization will take place, clearly. Now, depending on the different countries, depending on the regions, there will be a different degree of decentralization, but we will have one, clearly. There will be some very local places to exchange electricity. Still, we will need a certain amount of electricity. This amount will get bigger at a slow rate, but it will get bigger because we'll have more electric uses. Yeah, and what I would expect from the policymaker is to take into account that need. So if we shut down all the power plants, all the coal power plants, in France, that will be no big difference. In Germany, it starts to be interesting, and in Poland, it will be a problem. Okay, if I can say so. So we'll need somebody to take into account the big picture. Will we still have enough electricity, energy for our country, for our industry, for our services, for the private consumers? And if we say, okay, we need a certain amount, somebody has to tell us, okay, now you will get a certain amount of money to change your way of generating it, or you will get a certain amount of boundaries, technical boundaries in a way of generating this electricity, limitations and whatever. But we need signals in that direction, and we need somebody to take into account the fact that electricity is still needed. Yeah. That's a very important point. The policymakers really have to look at medium term, not that much of long term, but medium term, to be sure that we still have enough electricity for everybody. Yeah.
Yeah, I think this bigger view on the bigger change of the electricity system and the increase of electricity demand, I think is a good point. Maximilian.
Yeah, I think what Rainer said is absolutely right. I think there is a lot of activities ongoing, but I think that the understanding of that we need electricity for those phased out generation assets is very crucial for a sustainable future, and that's what we need to encourage. Either it's with subsidies as a starting point, but it's also enabling pilots. Yeah, coming to that topic. There are technologies, but it's still quite expensive looking at the extent of what needs to be done for commercial. But I think it's somehow crucial to also understand that the industry is making first steps, but normally cheap prices go down. We heard the topic of batteries and PV whenever we scale the business. Yeah, so whenever we have more applications and we learn how to use it. And I think that is a crucial part, yeah. So it will take us something to overcome that hurdle, because that's how we can get out of the vicious circle, yeah. So technologies are not cheap to really be commercialized, but on the other hand, we can't go down in the cost curve because there is no learning experience, and that is, I think, something that we need to encourage, and also look at larger scale commercial projects to be realized. One example, Moorburg in Hamburg. Yeah, so I think that is the scale we need to talk about if we want to achieve progress here.
So what I'm hearing is it's not the micro small pilots, but it's scaling up of projects and larger scale projects. I see you nodding. Cool. Rita, can I maybe ask you on, I mean, you've been working in 9 co-regions all across Europe. What are your impressions? I guess the question of finance, of support has come up in the discussions. What can you share from the Tracer project?
Well, considering also what is needed from the policy, I wanted to respond that in our Tracer project, we identified that, of course, effective post-mining management plans and recommendations on land use considering special site conditions are missing. So this is a clear appeal to the policymakers, of course, for the long-term thinking, and concrete site-specific planning is very important. Also mentioning another important message is that post-mining land is, of course, competing with different multiple demands. And here again, policymakers are needed to balance, for example, how the package of the offer for the stakeholders could be balanced: biomass production versus nature conservation or recreational use, early net income versus long-term ecosystem stability. And of course, again, stakeholder interests and social acceptance should be taken into account. Also, when we talk about sustainable biomass production, there is experience from different EU projects, but also in our project, a remark that growing energy crops for biomethane production, for example, with lucerne and sorghum, makes in technical analysis economic sense, but it is not fully viable yet. So again, research potential in the regions should be exploited more rapidly, I would say. Also, rapidly changing market conditions. Yes, this is also something for the policymakers to jump in and give some clarity. Yes, and also when talking about innovative value chains, we should also think about bio-based industries, about bioeconomy, and of course, energy crops could be grown on post-mining land, could provide some nice options. But again, here, some actions are still missing and are very, very limited, let's say. Also about the financing, I just wanted to mention that the coal regions and also some SMEs working around the coal regions in our Tracer project partner countries, they also a bit complain that the ministries are also not really actively promoting different EU funding opportunities. So you have to be very well organized yourself and know all different options of EU funding opportunities, modernization fund, and so on. So some opportunities are also missed due to this discommunication between the government, ministries, and stakeholders that would be ready to jump in and apply. So these are the messages I wanted really to mention and highlight.
Yeah. Yeah, thank you, Rita, for that view and background from your other projects. Maybe if I hope Anselm is still with us, I would like to ask you maybe one final question before we close. Now, we've heard this spectacular presentation from Hamburg. Now we've had all this discussion on the different options. Anselm, do you regret having chosen hydrogen? Do you think, oh, if I've talked to Maximilian and Thomas before, we could have done something different? That's a nasty question. And if you don't want to answer that question, I have an alternative question, because Rainer said it's a lot about stakeholder involvement. If I were to walk the streets in Hamburg and talk to people about the projects you have, the ideas you have for Moorburg, what would people say? Would they think it's a good idea? Hey, we're going for hydrogen? Or do they say, well, the city doesn't want to know what they want to do. First, they build a coal-fired power plant, then they do hydrogen. What will they do next? What do you expect? What an answer I get?
Well, we do not only deal with hydrogen in Hamburg. This is the project I talked about now. And it's mainly important because we can decarbonize the heavy industry in Hamburg with one strike. As I said, 1/3 of the natural gas usage can be replaced by hydrogen within the next 10 years. This is really an exhausting perspective. But in Hamburg, we also deal with other things that have been mentioned. We start with a geothermal project, 4,000 meters down in earth, and we are decarbonizing our district heat system. We have 2 other coal-fired plants, heating plants, which have to be replaced by other technologies. We start working on that. We support many heat pump projects. We support many projects that use waste heat from industry or from industry. These are only examples of the whole range of things that we are working on. So it's not only hydrogen. Hydrogen is for Moorburg, and this is a spectacular opportunity that we can't let slip away. But we work on all other technologies too.
Good. Yeah, thank you for putting that into perspective. And I think it underpins what we've been discussing, that the complexity and the choice of options and the interplay of different technologies that play into it. And I think this clear message, there's not just one silver bullet of, hey, let's all do this, right? Because it's this one technology or that one switch, but it's a very, very delicate way of looking at individual sites, of getting the possibilities out and using really the very specific assets that are there. Thank you. Unfortunately, we've come to the end of this exciting 1.5 hours. Thank you for the speakers. I see that we've had 400 people listening. I'm very sorry that I can't see those 400 people. I would love to go now for a coffee break with all of you and chat and discuss more. I take Anselm's invitation that in 2025 we're going to have an on-site visit. Let's see about the coffee break there. And definitely there will be more events during the course of this week. Virtual events. Bring your own coffee, but I'll hope you tune in, and thank you for the discussion, and to be continued.
Thank you very much for having us.